Sometimes life's greatest strength is found in the quiet moments: a mother's love, a family's resilience, and the courage to carry on despite loss. Today, I want to share with you the remarkable true story of a grandmother who raised 7 children alone after the war, a journey filled with sacrifice, hope, and unwavering love. Stay with me as we walk through this heartfelt tale. A true story about this grandma, raising 7 kids alone after the war: strength, love, and sacrifice. The porch was quiet. A gentle breeze stirred the faded curtains inside the small farmhouse, carrying with it the faint scent of autumn leaves and the distant hint of wood smoke. Outside, Mary sat alone in her familiar old rocking chair, the one she had owned for more than half a century. The chair creaked softly with each slow sway, echoing in the stillness of the evening like a tired lullaby. In her hands was a photograph, yellowed and worn at the edges, as delicate as the memories it held. She stared down at the faces frozen in time: the man with kind eyes, the little girl with a cheeky smile, the boys with their arms around each other, caught in a moment of laughter. Those faces were her life, her heart, and yet the years had etched a deep loneliness into her soul, one that even the laughter of 7 children could never fully erase. Mary's hands trembled as she traced the outline of her husband's face with a finger softened by age. He had been gone for longer than she cared to count. The war had taken him away, like it did so many others, leaving behind a silence that echoed through the halls of their home and in the quiet spaces of her heart. The night had settled in slowly, the kind of deep, velvety darkness that wrapped the world in a hush. The porch light flickered, casting long shadows across the weathered boards beneath her feet. Mary could almost hear the creak of the floorboards as her children ran through the house, their laughter filling every corner. But tonight, the only sound was the steady rhythm of her rocking chair and the soft whisper of the wind through the trees. She thought back to the long years of raising her family alone, to the early mornings when she would rise before dawn to prepare breakfast for her 7 children, each with their own needs and dreams. The house was often too small, the money too tight, and the nights too long. Yet somehow, Mary had managed to keep it all together, with a fierce love that refused to break. But now, at nearly 90 years old, the weight of those years pressed heavily upon her. The years of sacrifice, of endless worry, of holding back tears so her children wouldn't see. The years of learning to be both mother and father, nurse and teacher, cheerleader and disciplinarian. Her mind drifted to the day she received the last letter from her husband. Letters that had once been her lifeline, now just faded words on brittle paper. She remembered the aching wait at the mailbox, the hope that each day might bring news, and the crushing despair when the mailman passed by without a word. War had taken so much from Mary: her youth, her dreams, and the man she loved. It had reshaped her life in ways she never imagined, and yet somehow, it had also carved out a story of strength and resilience that few could understand. The porch creaked again beneath her shifting weight, and Mary's eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow alone, but of a lifetime's worth of memories. The photograph she held was more than just an image. It was a reminder of everything she had endured, everything she had loved and lost. She thought of the children who had grown into adults, scattered across the country with lives of their own. 7 lives she had nurtured and protected, often at the cost of her own happiness. There were birthdays missed, holidays spent worrying over bills, nights awake by the fire praying for safety and health. The house behind her was quieter now. Many of her children had moved away. Some had started families of their own. The walls that once echoed with their voices now held only echoes of the past. Yet Mary found comfort in the small routines she maintained: the morning cup of tea, the weekly calls to her grandchildren, the tending to her modest garden. Even in her solitude, there was a stubborn spark of life in Mary. She was a woman who had seen the worst of times and still found reasons to hope. Her hands, though gnarled and worn, still worked the soil with care. Her heart, though heavy, still beat with love. Tonight, though, there was something different in the air, a quiet stirring beneath the surface, like the first notes of a long-forgotten song. Mary sensed that the past was reaching out to her, drawing her back to moments she had long kept locked away. She closed her eyes briefly and let the memories wash over her. The laughter, the tears, the endless nights of worry, and the fierce pride she felt watching her children grow. She saw again the face of the man she had loved, the sound of his voice, the warmth of his embrace, and in that stillness, Mary felt the weight of all those years and all those stories, waiting to be told. Stories of love and loss, of sacrifice and hope, of a woman who had carried the world on her shoulders and never let it crush her spirit. The night deepened, stars twinkling quietly above like distant promises. Mary opened her eyes, the photograph still cradled in her hands. She knew this was no ordinary evening. Something inside her was shifting, a gentle call to remember, to heal, to find peace. She rocked slowly, letting the night settle around her, feeling the quiet strength of a lifetime behind every breath. The porch light flickered once more, before glowing steady, casting a soft halo around her figure. Mary was ready. Ready to look back, ready to tell her story. The story of a grandma who had raised 7 children alone after the war, who had faced heartbreak and hardship, but never lost her courage or her love. And as the wind whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of fall and old dreams, Mary began to speak. Not out loud, but in her heart. A story was about to unfold, one that would reach across generations, touching the lives of those who would listen and remember. The night was hers, the past calling her name. And with each gentle rock, Mary prepared to share the tale she had kept safe for so long. Mary lived in a modest, weathered farmhouse, nestled on the edge of a small town in the Midwest, a place where the seasons spoke louder than words, and the rhythm of life was measured in sunrises and harvests. Now in her late 80s, she had grown accustomed to the quiet that settled over her days, the kind that came after decades of relentless work and unyielding responsibility. Each morning, she followed a simple routine that grounded her. A cup of black coffee brewed just right, the rustle of newspaper pages, and a slow walk to tend her small garden, where chrysanthemums bloomed stubbornly against the fading summer. The house was neat but worn, much like Mary herself, with faded curtains, wooden floors softened by time, and photographs that lined the mantelpiece. Snapshots of a family long grown and spread across the country. Yet beneath the calm surface of her days, there lingered a quiet ache, something you wouldn't notice if you only glanced her way. It was in the way her eyes sometimes drifted to the empty chair at the kitchen table, or how her fingers would unconsciously smooth the folds of an old quilt that still carried the faint scent of her late husband's cologne. There was a loneliness wrapped in routine, a gentle but persistent shadow cast by years of loss and longing. Mary's children were all grown now, scattered like leaves caught in the wind. Her eldest son, James, lived a few states away, working in a city that never seemed to sleep. Her daughters, Grace and Helen, had families of their own and sent pictures of grandchildren who called Mary Grandma, with the wide-eyed wonder of youth. And her youngest, Tommy, had recently returned from military service overseas, carrying with him the weight of his own battles. Despite the miles between them, Mary stayed connected through weekly phone calls, holiday visits, and letters that sometimes arrived too late. Her home, once filled with the vibrant chaos of 7 children, had settled into a quieter existence. The rooms that had echoed with laughter and the patter of little feet now held only memories, faint echoes of voices, and the scent of freshly baked bread. She kept herself busy with small projects, fixing a loose floorboard, knitting blankets for the local shelter, or volunteering at the community center. But there were moments when the stillness felt too heavy, when the walls seemed to close in, reminding her of all that had been lost and all that had never come to be. Mary's heart carried a deep reservoir of strength, born from years of sacrifice and unwavering love. She had been the pillar for her family through storms both literal and figurative, raising 7 children alone after the war took her husband away. She had been a mother, father, nurse, and teacher, all roles carried with quiet dignity and fierce determination. Yet, even the strongest walls have cracks, and beneath Mary's composed exterior lay wounds that had never fully healed. There were nights when she would lie awake, haunted by the memories of a life interrupted. The silence of the house pressed against her ears, and the absence of a voice she had longed to hear again was a weight she carried every day. She often found herself reflecting on the years past, the moments both bitter and sweet. The day she learned her husband had gone missing in action, the endless days of waiting, the hope that slowly faded into sorrow, how she had gathered her children close, even as her own heart fractured, and vowed to keep them safe against all odds. Mary's life had been shaped by war and its aftermath, but it was also marked by resilience, the kind that isn't shouted from rooftops, but whispered in the quiet acts of love. Preparing school lunches with tired hands, sewing buttons on worn coats, sitting through countless school plays and baseball games, always present, always steady. Her community knew her as a woman of gentle strength, someone who could be counted on when times were tough. Neighbors would stop by for a cup of tea and stories, drawn to her warmth and the quiet wisdom that came from a life fully lived. Yet few truly knew the depth of her sacrifices, the nights spent crying silently in the dark, or the moments when she questioned whether she could carry on. As Mary moved through her days, she clung to the memories of the family she had built and the love that sustained her. Though her husband had been gone for more than half a century, his presence lingered in the stories she told her children, in the traditions she maintained, and in the photograph she kept close. There was a strength in Mary's quiet endurance, a grace that came from facing life's harshest trials with unwavering resolve. But there was also a longing, a wish that the past could be touched just once more, that the pieces of a broken story might somehow be made whole. Her heart carried both the weight of loss and the light of hope, a delicate balance that defined her days. And as she sat by the window watching the sun dip below the horizon, she knew that the journey through her memories was far from over. The house might be quiet now, but the stories it held were alive, waiting to be told. And Mary, with her worn hands and steady heart, was ready to begin that telling. Family. That word carried so much weight in Mary's life. It was the foundation she had built her world upon, the reason she rose each day despite the heaviness in her heart. Her 7 children were more than just names or faces in photographs. They were the living legacy of a love that had weathered war, hardship, and loss. Each of them held a piece of her soul, and through them, her story lived on. There was James, the eldest, who had always carried the quiet sense of responsibility that comes from being the oldest sibling. Mary remembered his first steps, his hesitant words, and later the way he would stand watch over his younger brothers and sisters. James had inherited his father's gentle eyes and steady hands, traits that served him well as he grew into a man who provided for his family, even from miles away. Grace, her first daughter, was a spark of joy and determination. Mary could still hear her laughter ringing through the house and see her running barefoot through the kitchen after school, cheeks flushed with excitement. Grace had a way of making even the smallest moments feel like celebrations, a reminder to cherish life despite its hardships. Mary's heart swelled with pride whenever she thought of Grace's unwavering spirit. Helen, quieter and more introspective, was the thoughtful one. Mary often found her curled up with a book or sketching in a notebook, lost in worlds of imagination. Helen's kindness and empathy became a balm for the family during trying times, offering comfort when words failed. Mary treasured the gentle strength her daughter brought to their lives. Then came Michael and Tommy, the boys with boundless energy and mischievous grins. Mary often chuckled recalling their endless games and playful squabbles, the noise and chaos they brought to a house that sometimes felt too small for so many dreams. They were both brave and tender-hearted, traits that revealed themselves in their loyalty to family and their quiet acts of kindness. Sarah and little Annie, the youngest, were the blossoms of Mary's later years. Sarah's determination to learn and succeed was a beacon of hope, especially as the world around them shifted with time. Annie's wide-eyed wonder and innocent questions reminded Mary of the preciousness of each day, even when life seemed overwhelming. Together, the 7 children filled Mary's world with purpose. Their laughter and tears, successes and struggles, were intertwined with the threads of her own story. She had nurtured them with unwavering love, sometimes at the expense of her own needs, always putting their well-being first. The house they grew up in was more than shelter. It was a sanctuary, a place where love was both abundant and fiercely protective. Mary's relationship with her children was a tapestry woven from countless moments, waking early to prepare breakfast, sewing patches onto worn clothing, helping with homework by the light of a kerosene lamp. There were tears shed over scraped knees and broken hearts, celebrations for graduations and first jobs, quiet conversations on worn porch steps deep into the night. Her husband, Robert, had been the center of their family story before the war took him away. A kind and gentle man, Robert's presence was felt even in his absence. His laughter still seemed to echo faintly through the halls, a comforting reminder of a time when the family was whole. Mary often found herself speaking to his photograph, as if to bridge the gap between past and present. The love between Mary and Robert had been strong, forged in simpler times and tested by the storm of war. They had dreamed of a future filled with children's voices and shared moments, a future Mary fought to preserve even when it seemed impossible. Though Robert was gone, the love they shared remained a guiding light for Mary and her children. The family faced many challenges together: financial struggles, illnesses, the scars left by a world at war. But through it all, Mary's love never wavered. She was the anchor that kept them grounded, the steady hand that guided them through uncertain waters. Her children knew that no matter what, Mary's arms were always open, her heart always ready to forgive and embrace. Mary's reflections on her family were bittersweet. She cherished the memories of warm dinners around the table, stories shared by the fire, and the feeling of safety that only a mother's love can provide. Yet, she also carried the pain of moments missed: birthdays when money was tight, holidays spent worrying over bills, and the ache of not having Robert's steady presence to share the load. Her children had grown up quickly, too quickly, in a world forever changed by war and hardship. Mary had done her best to shield them from the worst, but some wounds ran too deep. She knew that the strength she had shown was mirrored in them, a testament to the resilience that family can inspire. Even now, as her children lived their own lives far from the farmhouse, Mary felt their presence close. The letters, the phone calls, the occasional visits were threads that kept their bond strong across time and distance. She smiled softly as she thought of their children, her grandchildren, who brought fresh light into their lives. Family was Mary's greatest joy and her most profound responsibility. It was the heart of her story, the reason she carried on through dark days and lonely nights. The love she had poured into her children was a legacy far richer than any material wealth, a legacy of hope, endurance, and the unbreakable bonds that hold a family together. As Mary sat by the window that evening, the fading light casting long shadows across the room, she whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude for the family she had raised, for the love they shared, and for the memories that kept them close, even when they were miles apart. The story of Mary and her family was far from over. It was a story written in sacrifice and joy, in tears and laughter, in the quiet moments that define a lifetime. And as the night settled in, Mary felt a renewed sense of purpose, to remember, to heal, and to share the love that had shaped her life. War had a way of ripping through lives like a relentless storm, leaving destruction in its wake that no one could fully escape. For Mary, it was not just the distant thunder of battles fought overseas, it was the shattering silence that followed, the absence of her husband, Robert, who had gone off to fight with a promise to return. That promise, like so many others, was broken. The news came slowly at first, like a creeping fog. Letters that once arrived with regularity began to stop. Days turned into weeks without word. Mary waited at the mailbox every morning, heart pounding with hope and dread. The community whispered about the missing, the lost, the fallen. Mary clung to the belief that Robert was still alive somewhere, that the war hadn't claimed him. Then came the dreaded knock on the door. A solemn man in uniform stood on the porch, bearing a letter and an expression that spoke of finality. Mary's knees weakened, the world tilting beneath her as the words sank in. Robert was missing in action, presumed dead. Her grief was a quiet, crushing thing. It wasn't the dramatic wailing one might expect. It was a steady ache that settled deep in her bones. The war had taken her partner, the father of her children, and left her to navigate the harsh realities of life alone. The days that followed were a blur of sadness and survival. Mary had 7 children to raise, each one needing her in ways that no one else could fill. The town rallied around her in small ways. Neighbors brought meals, friends offered help. But the void left by Robert's absence was vast and unfillable. Letters from other families told stories of loss and resilience, but Mary felt the weight of her own struggle keenly. The house was no longer just a home. It was a fortress she had to defend against the creeping despair that threatened to overwhelm her. Mary's children, too young to fully grasp the situation, felt the change in the air. They missed their father's voice, his warm presence, and the security he provided. But Mary had to be both mother and father now, a role she assumed with quiet determination. She learned to stretch every penny, to make meals from the simplest ingredients, and to mend clothes that had seen better days. Nights were spent comforting scared children, whispering stories of hope and courage even when her own heart was breaking. The war had stolen many things, but Mary refused to let it steal her family's future. She became a pillar of strength, a beacon in the darkness for her children. Her resolve was tested daily, but she faced each challenge with the fierce love that only a mother could possess. There were moments when the weight of it all felt unbearable. Mary would retreat to the porch in the evenings, clutching Robert's photograph, tears falling silently as the night wrapped around her. The loneliness was profound, but so was her resolve to keep going. Her children watched their mother's strength and learned from it. They saw how she carried the burden without complaint, how she found joy in small victories, and how her love never wavered. Mary became more than a parent. She became a symbol of hope and endurance. As the war dragged on and eventually came to an end, Mary faced a new reality, raising 7 children without the man she had loved. The house was quieter, the rooms fuller of memories but emptier of presence. The loss was a defining moment in Mary's life, one that shaped the woman she would become. It taught her resilience, the power of love, and the depth of sacrifice. Though the war had taken much, it could not take her spirit. Mary's story was one of many, yet uniquely hers, a testament to the strength found in the face of unimaginable loss. It was a story of a woman who stood alone, raising 7 children after the war, carrying the weight of absence with grace and courage. As she looked out over the fields from her porch, Mary often thought of Robert. She imagined him walking beside her, his hand in hers, their family whole once again in memory, if not in flesh. The past was heavy, but it was also a wellspring of strength. And Mary, despite all she had lost, refused to let the war define her family's future. Life after the war was not the quiet, gentle return to normalcy that many had hoped for. Instead, it felt like stepping into a new storm, one just as fierce but filled with different kinds of challenges. For Mary, the years that followed were a constant balancing act, holding her family together while trying to heal her own fractured heart. The days turned into months, then years, but the wound left by Robert's absence never fully closed. There was a heaviness in the air, a subtle tension that wrapped itself around birthdays, holidays, and family gatherings. Mary's children grew up fast, their childhood shadowed by the quiet sacrifice of their mother and the memory of a father they barely knew. Sometimes, Mary would catch herself lost in thought, staring out at the vast fields that stretched beyond the farmhouse. The land was fertile and promising, yet it reminded her of the life that had been put on hold. The celebrations were quieter, smiles sometimes tinged with a hint of sadness. The missing pieces of their family shaped every moment. Birthdays passed with simple cakes and homemade gifts, often without the warmth of the father's embrace. Christmas mornings were filled with the excited chatter of children unwrapping presents, but Mary's heart ached in the spaces where Robert's presence once was. The children would glance toward the empty chair at the head of the table, a silent acknowledgement of the loss they all felt, but seldom spoke about. Time was both a healer and a reminder. As her children grew older, their lives branching out into the world, Mary found herself alone more often than not. The house, once a bustling sanctuary, echoed with silence that settled into every corner. Yet within her, the memories of those early years, the laughter, the struggles, the love, remained vivid, a bittersweet tapestry of life. Regret also lingered in the shadows. Mary sometimes wondered if she had done enough, if she had given her children all they needed to thrive. The sacrifices she had made weighed heavily, and the moments missed, birthdays, school plays, late-night talks, were wounds that never fully healed. But Mary also saw the resilience in her children. They carried the lessons she had taught them, strength in adversity, kindness in hardship, and the unyielding bond of family. Her sacrifices were reflected in their successes and the love they shared with one another. Though the war had torn her family apart in many ways, it had also forged a connection that time could not break. The passing years brought their own challenges. Health issues crept in quietly, slowing Mary's step and dimming her once bright eyes. The garden she tended with such care began to need less attention, and the porch where she spent so many evenings became a place of quiet reflection. But even as her body aged, her spirit remained unbowed. Mary found comfort in small rituals, a cup of tea at dawn, letters from grandchildren, the familiar creak of her rocking chair. She held tightly to the fragments of joy that life still offered, even as the shadows of loss stretched long. One afternoon, as autumn leaves drifted lazily from the trees, Mary found herself leafing through a worn family album. The photographs were a journey through time, the wide-eyed innocence of children, the proud smile of a young mother, the blurred edges of a man who was both present and absent. Each picture told a story, each glance a reminder of what had been and what might have been. It was in these quiet moments that Mary felt the full weight of time, the passing years that had both healed and deepened the wounds of loss. The laughter of children that once filled the house was now replaced by memories, both sweet and sorrowful. Yet through it all, Mary's love never faltered. It was the thread that wove her family together, the steady flame that refused to be extinguished. Her home was a testament to endurance, a place where the past lived alongside the present, and where hope still found a way to grow. There were times when the sorrow felt overwhelming, when the silence seemed too loud, and the nights too long. But Mary faced each day with quiet courage, drawing strength from the love she had nurtured and the family she had raised. She knew that life was fragile and fleeting, that time would eventually claim its due. But she also knew that the legacy of love she had built would endure far beyond her years. Her children, her grandchildren, and even the generations yet to come carried a piece of her heart, a living memory of a woman who had faced unimaginable loss and chosen love anyway. As Mary sat on her porch that evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon in a blaze of amber and gold, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. The years had been hard, the losses deep, but the love remained, a constant, unbreakable force. And though the days of bustling laughter and crowded rooms were behind her, Mary knew that the story of her family was far from over. It was a story written in resilience, in quiet sacrifice, and in the unshakable bonds of love that hold us all together, no matter the distance or the years. It was an ordinary Tuesday afternoon when something small, almost insignificant, set off a cascade of memories Mary had long tucked away, the kind of moment that doesn't announce itself with fanfare, but arrives quietly, like a whisper from the past. Mary was sitting in her worn armchair, the afternoon sun filtering softly through lace curtains, when the radio crackled to life with a familiar tune. The melody floated through the room, a gentle, haunting song from the war years, one that Robert had loved to hum while working in the garden or fixing the porch steps. The tune, delicate and bittersweet, wove its way into the corners of Mary's mind, stirring something deep and long forgotten. For a moment, she sat frozen, her heart caught between joy and sorrow. The song carried the weight of old hopes and dreams, the ones she'd held tight in her youth, before the war ripped through their lives. It was a reminder of a time when things felt simpler, filled with the promise of a future she'd once imagined with Robert. The radio continued to play, and Mary's fingers tightened around the arms of her chair. Memories came rushing in, the feel of Robert's hand in hers, the warmth of family dinners, the sound of children's laughter echoing through the house. The past wasn't just a place in her mind anymore. It was alive, vivid, and urgent. Later that day, as Mary was sorting through some old papers, she stumbled across a letter she hadn't seen in years. The envelope was yellowed and creased, sealed with a faded stamp. Her name was written in Robert's handwriting, elegant, steady, a reminder of the man she loved and lost. With trembling hands, Mary opened the letter. The words inside were a lifeline to a moment frozen in time, a message filled with hope and love from a husband separated by war, but never by heart. He wrote of dreams for their children, of a future he longed to return to, and of his unwavering faith in Mary's strength. Tears blurred Mary's vision as she read, the familiar curves of Robert's script bringing the past rushing back. She felt his presence beside her, the weight of his love filling the empty spaces of her home. The letter was a precious fragment of the life they had planned together, a testament to a bond that distance and time could not break. That evening, a knock at the door interrupted Mary's quiet reverie. Standing on the porch was a neighbor she hadn't seen in years, someone who had once been a close friend during the toughest days after the war. Their reunion was hesitant at first, but soon stories and memories flowed like the river after a spring thaw. The neighbor spoke of old friends, community gatherings, and the lives that had moved on but never forgotten. She mentioned people Mary hadn't thought about in decades, faces and names that carried their own stories of loss and survival. The conversation rekindled a sense of connection Mary hadn't realized she missed so deeply. As they talked, Mary realized that the past wasn't just a collection of memories to be locked away. It was a living part of her, intertwined with the present. The people, the places, the shared experiences, they were threads in the fabric of her life, waiting to be touched again. That night Mary sat on the porch, the letter from Robert resting on her lap. The song from the radio echoed softly in her mind, and the neighbor's visit lingered in her heart. It was as if the world was gently nudging her to open the doors she had kept closed for so long. The memories that surfaced were not just bittersweet. They were a reminder of the strength she had carried all these years, the love that had sustained her, and the hope that still burned quietly within. Mary felt a stirring in her soul, a call to face the past with courage and grace. The small triggers, the song, the letter, the unexpected visit, became the catalysts for something larger. They cracked open the shell of silence and solitude she had built around her heart, inviting her to remember, to feel, and to begin healing. Mary understood that healing wasn't about forgetting the pain, but embracing it, letting the light of love and memory illuminate even the darkest corners. It was about reclaiming the stories she had held inside, giving them voice once more. He spoke of battles and losses, of moments when decisions had to be made quickly, and of a secret mission that Robert had volunteered for, one that placed him in danger but was crucial to saving others. Thomas explained that the military had classified the mission and details were sealed away, leaving families with only fragments and silence. Mary listened, absorbing the weight of these revelations. The man she had loved was more than the quiet, gentle husband she remembered. He was a hero whose courage was hidden behind a veil of secrecy. But with that knowledge came a new grief. The burden of what had been left unsaid, the isolation Mary had felt during those long years of waiting. The discovery challenged Mary's understanding of her past and the man she had loved. It forced her to reconcile the image she had cherished with the complex realities of war and sacrifice. Yet, it also deepened her respect and admiration for Robert's bravery, the choices he made for the greater good. Mary shared these revelations with her children, opening a new chapter of conversations filled with questions, emotions, and healing. They saw their father in a different light, not just as a lost figure, but as a man who had carried the weight of difficult decisions for all of them. The hidden truths also brought Mary closer to Thomas and others who had lived through similar experiences. Together, they formed a quiet community of understanding, bound by the shared burden of secrets and sacrifices. Mary's journey taught her that the past is rarely simple. It is woven with complexities, contradictions, and hidden depths. But it is in facing these truths, however difficult, that healing begins. She learned that love is not about perfect stories or clear answers, but about embracing the whole tapestry of a life, with all its shadows and light. As Mary reflected on her discoveries, she felt a mix of sadness and peace. The hidden parts of her story no longer held power over her. Instead, they became threads in a richer, more complete narrative of courage, love, and resilience. Mary understood now that the greatest gift she could give her family was not just memories, but honesty. A legacy of truth that honored both the pain and the strength of those who came before. The hidden truths had been unveiled, and with them came a freedom that only understanding can bring. Mary's heart was lighter, her spirit stronger, ready to face the future with the knowledge that love endures beyond secrets and silence. The phone call came unexpectedly. like a sudden breeze that stirs the stillness of a quiet afternoon. Mary was sitting by the window, the fading light casting soft shadows across the room, when the telephone's shrill ring cut through the silence. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the receiver, heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. On the other end was a voice she hadn't heard in decades, a voice that belonged to a nephew of Robert, someone who had recently uncovered documents and letters that shed new light on her husband's fate. The caller spoke with a gentle urgency, expressing a desire to meet and share what they had discovered. Mary agreed without hesitation, sensing that this encounter might bring the closure she had long sought. The meeting was arranged at a small cafe in the nearby town, a neutral ground where memories and emotions could surface safely. When Mary arrived, she was greeted by a man in his 70s, his eyes reflecting both kindness and sorrow. They sat across from each other, the weight of years pressing gently between them. The nephew unfolded a bundle of letters, photographs, and official documents that told a story both heartbreaking and hopeful. Among the papers was a letter from Robert, written just weeks before his disappearance. In it, he spoke of an imminent mission, the dangers he faced, and his unwavering love for Mary and their children. But there was more, a final, undelivered message that revealed Robert had survived the initial ordeal but had been taken prisoner. The letter detailed his hopes to return home once the war ended, a promise that had remained unfulfilled until now. Mary listened, tears streaming down her cheeks, as the truth she had yearned for was finally spoken aloud. The years of silence, the unanswered questions, and the aching void in her heart began to soften with each word. The nephew then shared a story that brought a mixture of joy and sorrow, a story of a reunion that never happened. After the war, Robert had been held in a distant camp, too weak and disoriented to reach out. Letters sent in his name never arrived, and those waiting at home were left in painful uncertainty. The realization that Robert had lived longer than anyone had known and had endured unimaginable hardships was both a comfort and a source of renewed grief. Mary mourned not only the years lost, but the moments they had been denied. A reunion, a final embrace, the chance to say goodbye. Yet amidst the sorrow was a flicker of peace. The truth, once hidden in shadows, now stood in the light. Mary felt the presence of Robert more keenly than ever, as if the years of silence had been bridged by this moment of understanding. The meeting led to a visit to the small cemetery where Robert had been laid to rest years earlier. Mary stood beside his grave, the cool breeze carrying the scent of fresh flowers and earth. She placed a hand on the weathered headstone, her fingers tracing the carved letters with reverence. In that quiet place, surrounded by the whispers of the past, Mary whispered words she had held inside for decades, a prayer of forgiveness, gratitude, and love. She spoke not only to Robert, but to the family they had built together, to the children who carried his spirit, and to the future that awaited them all. The reunion, though long delayed, brought healing that had seemed impossible. Mary found solace in knowing the full story, in embracing the complexities of love and loss. The tears she shed were not just of sorrow, but of release, a letting go of pain and a welcoming of peace. Back at home, Mary shared the experience with her children, their faces a mixture of tears and smiles. The stories of Robert's courage and sacrifice took on new meaning, enriching the family's legacy. They gathered around her, holding hands, united in love and remembrance. Mary's heart felt lighter, the burdens of years easing as the truth unfolded. She knew that healing was not a destination, but a journey, one she had traveled with grace and courage. The phone call, the meeting, the visit to the grave, all were milestones in a path toward acceptance. Mary realized that even in the face of loss, love endures. It transcends time, distance, and silence. As the sun set that evening, painting the sky in hues of gold and rose, Mary sat quietly by the window once more. The house was still, but her heart was full. The story she had carried alone was now shared, honored, and alive. In the quiet moments, Mary felt Robert's presence, a gentle comfort, a steady hand guiding her forward. The past was no longer a chain, but a bridge, connecting her to the love that had shaped her life and the family she cherished. And in that connection, Mary found peace. The days after the reunion unfolded with a quiet intensity that Mary hadn't anticipated. The floodgates of emotion had opened wide, leaving her feeling both vulnerable and strangely liberated. The years of unanswered questions, the weight of silence, now gave way to a complicated mixture of grief, relief, and a tentative hope for healing. At first, the emotional aftermath was overwhelming. Memories she had carefully packed away came rushing back in vivid waves, moments of laughter and tears, milestones marked without Robert's presence, the long nights when she had borne her burdens alone. The ache of absence was still there, sharper in some ways now that the full story was known. Mary found herself drifting between moments of deep sorrow and unexpected joy. She would sit quietly by the window, a hand resting on the old quilt her daughter had sewn years ago, tears tracing the lines of a face etched with time. Other times, she caught herself smiling at a memory, a shared joke, a loving glance, a promise whispered in the past. Her children noticed the change, too. They gathered around her more often, their voices soft with concern and love. Conversations that once skirted around the pain now ventured deeper, touching on feelings that had long been left unspoken. Mary welcomed these moments, finding strength in their presence and in the shared journey toward understanding. The reunion had opened doors to forgiveness, both of others and of herself. Mary had carried guilt for the years spent waiting, for the moments she couldn't be both mother and father perfectly, for the sacrifices that sometimes left her children wanting. But in the quiet reflection that followed, she began to release those burdens. She realized that strength was not found in perfection, but in resilience, in rising again despite the hardships, in loving fiercely even when love was tested. Mary's journey had been one of endurance, of doing the best she could with the cards she was dealt, and that was enough. Healing came in small, sometimes surprising ways. A letter from a granddaughter filled with drawings and kind words brought tears of joy. A visit from a longtime friend rekindled old laughter. The simple act of tending her garden, watching new life sprout from the soil, reminded Mary that growth was possible even after the harshest winters. Yet, healing was not a straight path. There were days when the past felt like a heavy cloak, and the pain resurfaced unexpectedly. A scent, a song, a photograph triggering a memory too sharp to bear. Mary learned to honor these moments without judgment, allowing herself the grace to feel fully and then gently let go. Through it all, Mary discovered a deep well of gratitude. Gratitude for the love that had sustained her, for the family she had raised, and for the community that had surrounded her in times of need. She understood that her story was part of a larger tapestry, a narrative shared by many who had faced loss and found hope. Mary also found comfort in spirituality, a quiet faith that had been a companion through the darkest nights. Prayer and reflection offered solace, a space to surrender pain and welcome peace. She found strength in the belief that love transcended time and space, that those who had gone before were still with her in spirit. The emotional aftermath was a season of transformation. Mary emerged from it not unscathed, but renewed, a woman who had faced the depths of loss and returned with a heart open to life's gifts. Her resilience became a beacon to her family, a living testament to the power of love and forgiveness. As Mary moved through this chapter of her life, she embraced the fullness of her experience, the joys and sorrows, the memories treasured, and the wounds healed. She understood that healing was ongoing, a journey without a final destination, but one rich with meaning. Her family, too, was touched by this healing. They saw in Mary a renewed light, a softness that came from acceptance. The bonds between them deepened, strengthened by shared stories and the honest conversations that had once seemed impossible. Mary's story was no longer just about loss and sacrifice. It was about the triumph of the human spirit, the capacity to forgive, and the enduring nature of love. It was a narrative woven with threads of pain and hope, sorrow and joy, a story that would continue to inspire. In quiet moments, Mary would sit by the window and reflect on the path she had traveled. The journey had been hard, filled with unknowns and heartaches, but it had also been rich with love, courage, and resilience. The past was no longer a burden to carry alone, but a treasure to share, with her children, her grandchildren, and anyone willing to listen. It was a legacy of resilience, sacrifice, and unwavering love that deserved to be told. As the night deepened, Mary felt a quiet resolve settle over her. The memories awakened were a gift, a chance to reconnect with the life she had lived and the family she had raised. They offered a path toward peace, forgiveness, and perhaps even joy. Mary folded Robert's letter carefully and placed it back in its envelope, knowing she would read it again. The song still played softly in her mind, a soundtrack to the unfolding journey ahead. She rose from her chair and looked out over the fields, the moon casting a silver glow across the land. The night was filled with possibilities, and Mary was ready to step forward, into her past, her memories, and the healing that awaited. The days following that afternoon felt different for Mary. It was as if a gentle tide had begun to stir within her, a quiet awakening of memories and emotions she had long kept at bay. The song on the radio, Robert's letter, and the unexpected visit from her neighbor had cracked open a door, and she found herself drawn to what lay beyond it. One morning, with the soft light of dawn filtering through the curtains, Mary rose from her bed with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. She made her way to the attic, a dusty, forgotten space filled with boxes and trunks that held the fragments of her life. It was there she kept the memory box, a treasure trove of letters, photographs, and keepsakes that told the story of her family. The air was thick with the scent of aged paper and cedar. As Mary lifted the lid of the old wooden chest, a flood of memories washed over her. She pulled out letters tied with faded ribbons, worn photographs of her children as infants, and small mementos that seemed to pulse with life beneath her fingertips. Each item was a doorway to the past, the warmth of a child's embrace, the promise of a love interrupted, the pain and hope intertwined through decades. Mary ran her fingers over the brittle pages of Robert's letters, their words now even more precious after the awakening she had felt. She unfolded a letter dated years before the war ended, written in Robert's familiar hand. His words spoke of longing and dreams for their family's future, and Mary felt the ache of what might have been. But alongside the sorrow was a quiet strength, a promise that his love would endure, no matter the distance. As Mary sat surrounded by these treasures, she felt the past come alive, not as a weight to bear, but as a story waiting to be told. For so long she had hidden these memories away, fearful of opening old wounds. Now they felt like a bridge, connecting her to the love she lost, the family she raised, and the person she had become. The memory box held more than just keepsakes. It held the key to understanding herself and her journey. Mary realized that by confronting these memories, she could find peace, not by forgetting the pain, but by embracing it as part of her story. That day she began writing letters, notes to her children, to Robert, and to herself. Words poured out, unfiltered and raw, as she revisited moments of joy and sorrow. The act of writing became a balm, helping her make sense of the years and the feelings that had lain dormant. Mary also reached for the telephone, hesitating only briefly before dialing the number of an old friend from town. Their conversation was tentative at first, but soon the distance melted away as they shared stories, laughter, and tears. It was a reminder that she was not alone, that the past was woven into a community of shared experience. The awakening was more than just nostalgia. It was a call to reconnect, with family, with friends, and with herself. Mary found herself visiting places she hadn't seen in decades. The church where she and Robert had married, the schoolyard where her children played, the little diner where families gathered after Sunday services. Each visit stirred new memories, and with them, a deeper understanding of how her life had been shaped. Mary saw the resilience not just in herself, but in the people around her, the neighbors who had supported her, the children who had grown up strong, and the threads of love that bound them all. At night, as she sat by the window, Mary felt the gentle presence of Robert beside her. The past was no longer a distant shadow, but a living part of her. She could almost hear his voice, whispering encouragement, reminding her that love endures beyond time and loss. This awakening also stirred questions she had avoided for years. What had really happened during those long months of silence? Were there truths she hadn't yet uncovered? The need to seek answers grew, and with it, a cautious hope. Mary knew the road ahead would not be easy. Facing the past meant confronting pain and uncertainty, but it also offered the chance to heal, to forgive, and to embrace the full tapestry of her life. With renewed determination, she made plans to visit old friends and relatives, to gather stories and memories that might fill the gaps left by war and time. It was a journey both outward and inward, a quest to reclaim the past and find peace in the present. The memory box, once a dusty relic, had become a beacon of hope. Through its contents, Mary rediscovered the threads of connection that held her family and her life together. She understood now that memories, even painful ones, are the foundation of love and identity. As the weeks passed, Mary felt lighter, as if the burden of silence was lifting. The awakening was a gift, a chance to live fully in the moment while honoring the past. It was a reminder that life, with all its trials and triumphs, is a precious story worth telling. Mary's heart was opening, her spirit rekindled by the power of memory and love. She was ready to face whatever the future held, carrying with her the strength of a lifetime and the promise of healing. And so, surrounded by letters, photographs, and the soft light of morning, Mary began to write a new chapter, one of hope, courage, and the enduring power of the heart. Mary's decision to seek answers was not taken lightly. For years, she had lived with questions that lingered like shadows at the edges of her mind, fragments of stories half-remembered, whispers from neighbors, and the silence of the past. Now, with a renewed sense of purpose, she set out to fill those gaps, to find the truths that had long eluded her. Her first step was to revisit the places that had shaped her family's early years, the church where she and Robert had exchanged vows, the schoolhouse where her children had taken their first steps in learning, and the town square where neighbors gathered. Each place held echoes of the past, memories etched into the walls and streets. At the town's community center, Mary met with old friends and neighbors who remembered Robert well. Their stories varied. Some spoke of his kindness, others of his quiet bravery. But a common thread emerged. Robert had been a man deeply loved and respected, a husband and father whose absence was deeply felt. One neighbor, Mrs. Whitman, shared a letter she had kept, one Robert had written but never sent. The letter spoke of his hopes to return home, to rebuild the life he had left behind. Mary felt the ache of loss anew, but also the warmth of love that had never faded. Mary's journey then took her to the local archives, where she pored over newspapers, military records, and town documents. She found articles about soldiers missing in action, letters from families, and reports that painted a fuller picture of the war's impact on their community. Each piece brought her closer to understanding the reality Robert had faced. But the search wasn't just about facts. It was about healing wounds that years had left open. Mary began to visit others who had lost loved ones in the war, sharing stories and finding comfort in shared grief. Together, they formed a circle of strength, a community bound by loss and resilience. One day, Mary received a call from a distant cousin who had recently uncovered a trove of family letters and photographs. The cousin invited Mary to visit, offering hope that new pieces of the puzzle might emerge. Mary accepted, eager to uncover more of the story. The reunion was filled with tears and laughter as they sifted through old documents. Among the letters, Mary found messages from Robert that revealed struggles she hadn't known, his fears, his hopes, and the heartbreak of separation. These discoveries deepened her understanding and softened the edges of her pain. Mary's search also led her to reconnect with her children in new ways. She shared stories she had never told, opening doors to conversations about the past, the sacrifices, and the love that had carried them through. These moments strengthened their bonds and brought a new closeness to their family. As Mary traveled between towns and homes, she realized that her quest was as much about finding herself as it was about finding Robert. The journey was teaching her to embrace the complexities of her life, the joys and the sorrows, the memories treasured, and the truths difficult to face. Along the way, Mary encountered unexpected challenges. Some memories were painful, old wounds reopened by questions long unanswered. There were moments of doubt and fear when the past seemed too heavy to bear. But with each step, she found courage, drawn from the love of her family and the support of friends. Mary also discovered stories of other women who, like her, had raised families alone after the war. Their resilience inspired her and reminded her that she was part of a larger legacy of strength and survival. These shared experiences became a source of comfort and pride. Her search led to moments of revelation, small but profound awakenings that reshaped her understanding. She learned of sacrifices made by those around her, acts of kindness that had sustained her family, and the enduring power of hope. Mary's journey was not just about the past. It was about the present and the future. It was about healing old wounds so that love could flourish anew, about building bridges where silence had settled, and about embracing life with open arms. Through it all, Mary remained grounded in her love for her children and grandchildren. She wanted them to know the full story, the struggles and the triumphs, the sorrow and the joy. Her hope was that they would carry forward the legacy of resilience she had lived. As the days grew shorter and the air crisp with the approach of fall, Mary felt a quiet sense of fulfillment. The search for answers had brought her closer to the truth she needed, and in doing so, had opened her heart to healing. She understood that some questions might never be fully answered, that some mysteries would remain. But she also knew that peace came not from certainty alone, but from acceptance, the willingness to hold both joy and pain in her heart. Mary returned home with a treasure trove of memories and stories, ready to share them with those she loved. Her family gathered around as she recounted her journey, their eyes shining with pride and understanding. In the end, Mary's quest was a testament to the enduring strength of love and the unbreakable bonds of family. It was a journey of rediscovery, of courage, and of hope, one that would inspire generations to come. As she settled into her chair that evening, Mary smiled softly. The past was no longer a distant shadow, but a living, breathing part of her story. And with that realization came a deep and lasting peace. The truth, Mary soon discovered, was more complex than the memories she had carefully held on to for decades. What began as a hopeful journey to fill the gaps of a broken past soon unearthed shadows she hadn't anticipated. Secrets long buried beneath layers of silence and time. After many visits, phone calls, and heartfelt conversations, Mary stumbled upon a letter tucked away in an old trunk she had borrowed from a distant relative. It wasn't addressed to her, but to someone she had never heard of before. A man named Thomas, who had been a close friend of Robert's during the war. The letter hinted at a side of Robert's story Mary had never imagined. Reading the letter, Mary's heart pounded as she absorbed words that suggested Robert had been involved in a difficult choice during the war, one that might have saved lives but at great personal cost. The letter implied that Robert's disappearance had been shrouded in confusion and misinformation, that some truths had been hidden to protect the family from pain or scandal. Mary felt a whirlwind of emotions, disbelief, hurt, and a growing curiosity that demanded answers. She wondered why these details had been kept from her, why the story she had known was only part of the truth. Determined to understand, Mary sought out Thomas, who was now an elderly man living a few towns away. Their first meeting was tentative, filled with the careful navigation of years and old wounds. Thomas's eyes held both sorrow and relief as he began to share what he knew. The emotional aftermath had brought her to a place of peace, not the absence of pain, but the presence of grace. And in that grace, Mary found the strength to face each new day with hope and gratitude. The moment of farewell was both tender and inevitable. Life, with all its beauty and fragility, had brought Mary to a crossroads, where endings and beginnings intertwined. The years had been long, the journey arduous, and though her spirit remained strong, her body was beginning to tire. Mary's days were now marked by gentle rhythms, the soft light of morning, the warmth of family visits, the quiet companionship of old friends. She found solace in simple pleasures, a cup of chamomile tea, the rustle of autumn leaves, the comforting weight of a well-loved book in her hands. Yet beneath this calm lay the profound awareness that the time to say goodbye was drawing near. Her children gathered around her more often, their presence a balm to the heartache that sometimes surfaced. They shared stories, laughter, and tears, weaving the fabric of family even tighter. Mary welcomed these moments, cherishing the love that surrounded her and the legacy she had built. One afternoon, as the sun filtered softly through the curtains, Mary called her family close. Her voice, though gentle, carried the weight of intention. She spoke of forgiveness, of letting go of regrets, and embracing the fullness of life. Her words were a gift, a final lesson of grace and love. There was a quiet acceptance in the room, a shared understanding that this farewell was not an end, but a transition. Mary's eyes shone with a serene light as she looked at each face, the children who had been her strength, the grandchildren who carried her spirit forward. In the days that followed, Mary's health gently declined, her body surrendering with the dignity she had carried throughout her life. The house, once filled with the lively bustle of children, now held a peaceful stillness, a sacred space where love was the heartbeat. Mary's final moments were marked by a profound sense of peace. Surrounded by family, she closed her eyes with a smile, her heart full of gratitude for the journey she had walked. The love she had nurtured was a living legacy, woven into the lives of those she left behind. In the quiet that followed, her family found comfort in the memories they shared, the stories of strength and sacrifice, the laughter and tears, the unbreakable bonds of love. Mary's farewell was a chapter closed with grace, but her spirit remained a guiding light. The house stood as a testament to a life well lived, a place where love had been both refuge and foundation. And in the hearts of her family, Mary's legacy lived on, a beacon of resilience and hope. Though the goodbye was bittersweet, it was also a beginning. A beginning for those who carried her memory forward, who would tell her story to generations yet to come. Mary's life was a testament to the enduring power of love, a story that transcended time, loss, and distance. In the days after her passing, the family gathered to celebrate Mary's life. Stories were shared, songs sung, and tears shed, a tapestry of remembrance and honor. They spoke of her courage, her kindness, and the quiet strength that had carried them through. Mary's farewell was not just an ending, but a healing. It was a release from pain and a passage into peace. Her family, bound by love and memory, found strength in each other, knowing that her spirit would forever be with them. As the seasons turned and the years passed, Mary's story continued to inspire. Her legacy was a reminder that even in the face of loss, love endures, unbroken, unwavering, and eternal. And so, with a heart full of gratitude and grace, Mary said her final goodbye, leaving behind a family forever touched by her love and the timeless strength of her spirit. The world outside moved quietly, the seasons shifting with a gentle rhythm that seemed to echo the steady beat of Mary's heart. On the worn wooden porch of her farmhouse, a single rocking chair swayed slowly, its creak a soft song carried by the breeze. It was a place where time felt suspended, a refuge where memories could breathe and moments could stretch into eternity. Mary sat there often, wrapped in a faded shawl that had once belonged to her mother, the fabric soft from years of use and love. In her hands, she held a photograph, edges worn and colors faded, a glimpse into a life lived fully, with all its joys and sorrows. She rocked gently, eyes tracing the faces captured in that frozen moment. A young couple with bright eyes full of hope, children with laughter still lingering in their smiles. The photograph was a window to the past, a bridge between what was and what remains. The porch itself seemed alive with stories. The chipped paint on the railing told of summers spent watching fireflies dance in the dusk. The creaking floorboards remembered the footsteps of little ones running barefoot across the boards, chasing dreams in each other. The scent of honeysuckle from the garden carried whispers of long-ago afternoons filled with whispered secrets and shared dreams. Mary's gaze lifted to the horizon, where fields stretched wide and the sky blazed with the colors of a setting sun. The world was vast and beautiful, filled with endless possibilities even as it held the weight of memories. In this quiet place, Mary found a stillness that was more than peace. It was a space to feel deeply, to remember fully, to be present in the fullness of life. She let the moments linger, savoring the gentle sway of the chair and the soft rustle of leaves. Sometimes she would pull out a worn journal, the pages yellowed with age, and write letters she never intended to send. Words flowed freely, thoughts to loved ones gone, apologies for moments missed, expressions of love that transcended time. The act of writing was a balm, a way to breathe life into memories and to hold close what mattered most. On other days, Mary simply sat and listened. To the birdsong, the whisper of wind through the trees, the distant hum of a tractor working the fields. These sounds were threads in the tapestry of her life, connecting her to the earth and to the generations before and after. The porch was also a place of reflection, a sanctuary where Mary could face the quiet questions of her heart. She pondered the meaning of love and loss, the passage of time, and the legacy she would leave behind. In the gentle rocking, she found the courage to embrace both the light and shadow of her story. Mary's moments on the porch were a dance between past and present. Memories came alive with vivid clarity, a child's laughter echoing, a husband's warm embrace, the resilience forged in the face of hardship. Yet she also savored the here and now, the feel of the cool evening air, the soft glow of twilight, the promise of tomorrow. In these quiet hours, Mary understood that life's beauty is woven from the simple, ordinary moments. The rocking chair on the porch, the photograph held close, the gentle breeze that carries the past and future together. The porch was a place to breathe, to grieve, to celebrate. It was where Mary could sit with her memories, letting them wash over her like a gentle tide, and find peace in their ebb and flow. As the stars began to twinkle above, Mary wrapped her shawl tighter and looked up at the night sky, a vast canvas dotted with light. She felt a deep connection to all that had been and all that would be, a thread in the endless fabric of time. The rocking chair continued its slow sway, a heartbeat in the quiet night. And Mary, cradled by memories and love, found a moment of grace, a breath between the past and the future, a quiet place to simply be. As the years settled softly around Mary, like the gentle snow that dusted her garden each winter, she found herself embracing life in a way she hadn't before. The sharp edges of loss had softened into a quiet acceptance, a delicate balance between sorrow and joy that only time could teach. Her journey, marked by sacrifice and strength, had brought her to a place of grace she hadn't thought possible in those long, lonely nights. Mary's days were now painted with moments of simple beauty, the laughter of grandchildren playing in the yard, the comforting aroma of fresh-baked bread wafting from the kitchen, the warmth of a sunbeam filtering through the window as she sipped her morning tea. These were the gifts she cherished, treasures that reminded her of the life she had lived and the love that endured. She had come to understand that life was not about perfect endings or flawless journeys, but about embracing the imperfections, the unexpected twists, and the quiet victories. Mary's story was woven with both light and shadow, each thread vital to the tapestry of who she had become. In the evenings, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky with hues of amber and rose, Mary often found herself reflecting on the past with a tender smile. The memories that once brought pain now carried lessons about resilience, forgiveness, and the enduring power of love. She no longer feared the weight of those memories but welcomed them as companions on her path. Mary also found joy in the connections she nurtured. Her children, now adults with families of their own, visited often, filling the house with warmth and stories. Grandchildren ran through the rooms, their laughter a healing balm for the years that had passed. Friends gathered on the porch, sharing tea and tales as they had done for decades. The bonds of family and friendship were the roots that anchored Mary's spirit. She saw in them the reflection of her own strength and the continuation of a legacy she had worked so hard to build. It was a reminder that love transcends time and that even as seasons change, some things remain constant. Mary's acceptance of life's imperfections brought with it a new freedom, a lightness of being that allowed her to savor each moment fully. She danced slowly with time, embracing the beauty in the ordinary and the grace in the everyday. Her journey had transformed her from a woman burdened by loss to one who carried her story with dignity and hope. She had learned that true strength lies not in denying pain, but in facing it with courage and compassion. As the years unfolded gently, Mary became a storyteller, sharing her experiences with those willing to listen. Her words were woven with wisdom and heart, a gift to younger generations seeking guidance and inspiration. Through her stories, Mary's legacy grew, a beacon of resilience and love that would endure long after she was gone. The farmhouse, once a place of hardship and struggle, had become a sanctuary of peace and remembrance. Its walls held echoes of laughter, tears, and unspoken prayers, a testament to a life fully lived and deeply loved. Mary's heart was full as she sat on her porch one quiet evening, watching the stars emerge in the velvet sky. She felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey, the lessons, and the love that had carried her through. Her story was one of endurance, of hope, and of the timeless power of family. It was a reminder that even in the face of loss, life can be beautiful, and love can heal. As the night wrapped around her like a comforting shawl, Mary smiled softly, knowing that she had lived well and loved deeply. The past had shaped her, but it did not define her. She was at peace. There is a truth that unfolds slowly with age, one that whispers through the years like a gentle breeze, that love, in all its forms, is the thread that weaves life together, fragile yet unbreakable, simple yet profound. Mary's journey had been a testament to this truth, a story not just of loss and hardship, but of the enduring power of the heart to forgive, to hope, and to heal. As she sat on her porch in the twilight of her life, Mary reflected on the path that had brought her here, a winding road marked by moments of joy and sorrow, sacrifice and grace. She thought of the family she had raised, the love she had given and received, and the legacy that would outlive her. Mary understood now that family was more than blood or shared history. It was a living, breathing connection that transcended time and circumstance. It was in the laughter of her grandchildren, the quiet strength of her children, and the memories that bound them all. Family was a circle without end. Forgiveness, she had learned, was the bridge between past wounds and future peace. It was not forgetting or excusing the pain, but choosing to release its hold on the soul. Mary's heart had carried scars, some visible, many invisible, but through forgiveness, those scars had softened, becoming marks of resilience rather than chains of sorrow. In the quiet moments, Mary often whispered prayers of gratitude for the love that had sustained her, for the lessons learned, and for the chance to live a life filled with meaning. She knew that her story was but one of countless others, each unique yet united by the common threads of love, loss, and hope. Mary's legacy was one of courage and compassion, a beacon to those who might find themselves walking similar paths. She hoped that her journey would inspire others to embrace life fully, to cherish the people they love, and to find strength in vulnerability. She also carried a deep appreciation for the simple, often overlooked moments. A shared meal, a warm embrace, the sound of a child's laughter. These were the treasures of life, the quiet miracles that give meaning to our days. As night fell, Mary looked up at the stars scattered across the sky, each one a reminder of the countless lives intertwined through time. She felt a profound connection to those who had gone before and to those who would come after. Her story was now part of that vast tapestry, a thread woven with love, endurance, and grace. Mary smiled softly, knowing that though her time on this earth was drawing to a close, the love she had given and received would continue to ripple through generations. It was a legacy not measured in years, but in hearts touched and lives changed. In the end, Mary understood that life's greatest gift was love, imperfect, enduring, and ever-present. It was the light that guides us through darkness, the bond that holds us together, and the hope that carries us forward. And with that truth held close, Mary closed her eyes, her heart full and at peace, ready to rest in the embrace of a love that never ends. Mary's story is a poignant journey of resilience, love, and healing. Left alone to raise 7 children after her husband Robert went missing in the war, Mary faced the harsh realities of loss and hardship with unwavering strength. Over the years, she built a family grounded in love, sacrifice, and perseverance, shielding her children from the pain while nurturing their dreams. Her path was marked by loneliness and unspoken grief, but also by moments of profound joy and connection. Through memories triggered by an old song, a lost letter, and unexpected reunions, Mary began to confront her past and seek answers about Robert's fate. Her search uncovered hidden truths that reshaped her understanding of love and sacrifice. The emotional aftermath of these revelations brought both sorrow and peace, leading Mary to forgive, heal, and reconnect with her family in deeper ways. Her farewell was a graceful acceptance of life's impermanence, leaving behind a legacy of courage and compassion. Mary's story reminds us that love transcends loss and time, weaving generations together with threads of hope and forgiveness. It teaches that healing is not the absence of pain, but the courage to face it, and that family is the heart's true home. Through Mary's eyes, we see the strength in vulnerability and the power of enduring love, a timeless truth that resonates across ages. Her life is a beacon for all who navigate the complexities of loss and the beauty of healing, inspiring us to embrace our stories with grace and hope. Thank you for spending this time with me, sharing in a story that reminds us all of the power of love and resilience. If this touched your heart, I invite you to share where you're watching from in the comments below. And when you're ready, please join me for the next story. Another journey of family, courage, and hope. Until then, take care and be well.